Hi, welcome back to Tiny Garage Fabrication. Today we are back in the actual tiny garage. It's a lot easier for me to do fabrication work over here versus in the larger shop that I rent. I've got a lot of metal work to do. I noticed when I was working on the suspension and the frame that the rocker panels, the body mounts, the floorboards, and just a whole bunch of stuff under the truck is in absolutely terrible shape. So we're going to have to separate the body and the frame, start cutting a whole bunch of stuff out, start making a bunch of new cab mounts, new body pieces, new floor panels, and get all that stuff welded in. So I don't know how many videos this is going to take to get to a finish line, but we got to start somewhere, and that's right now. So let's turn to. All right, taking a look at the floors, the reason why we're here. These things are pretty disgusting, and as you can see, we've got a B is for build style permanent repair. That's just some fiberglass and fiberglass cloth laid over holes. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we take that out and do something proper. I'm going to take these fenders off. I didn't take them off. I mentioned in episode 1 or episode 2 that the lower part of the fenders were actually bondoed to the rocker panel, which was my first sign that something terrible was going on with this truck. Now look at this. The Datsun emblems were filled in by somebody kind of half-ass welding alignment shims and fender washers to the back. Like, seriously, what's going on here? Good bit of rot through the front of the rocker panel and actually all the way down the side. We'll get to that later. Now I'll take off the other fender and enjoy some music while she goes. Now I'm clearing everything out of the cab that I've piled in there. I'm taking off really everything. The cab will be almost completely stripped by the end of this. The seat's coming out, and you'll see why here. The seat was in terrible shape. Duct tape and just yellow, gooey, sticky shit everywhere. This is going to get reupholstered. Stay tuned. I'm doing it myself. It's going to be super cool. Oh man, I found an amp. Very nice. The seat belts are all coming out. These have the really cool 3-piece style seat belts. I'm going to redo all of these as well. I think they're super rad the way that they operate. All the door hardware, door panels, interior panels, and the doors are going to come off just to make this thing a little bit lighter to move around. Now it's time to take the glass out. I've got a glass guy that can get me pretty much anything. I ordered the gaskets from eBay. They're coming out of Thailand. Hopefully they fit well. If not, then I'm gonna have to cry once and buy twice, but we'll see how they work out. Pulling this thing out is pretty simple. It's a destructive method. I just cut the weather seal around where it holds the glass in, and then popped the glass out, and then pulled the weather seal off of the frame. Gonna do the exact same thing to the rear window here in a little bit. Steering column's got to come out. That's one of the 2 things that really attach the cab to the frame, the steering column, and then the other thing is the parking brake cable. Pretty sure I took that off camera, but it's super quick. Like 3 bolts comes out. Removing the dash as an entire assembly, also pretty simple. There's the 3 bolts on the front, and then I believe there's a bolt on either side, a bolt in the middle, and 2 bolts behind where the steering column mounts. And then the whole thing pretty much lifts out. There's a few wires and some cables that go to the heater box that you have to undo as well, but they're all pretty simple to take off. This entire dash is going to be going through a refresh from top to bottom, inside and out. That should encompass an entire video sometime in the future. Focus our attention on the cab mounts. This one here was very well rusted out. The rear ones and the front ones more or less came out okay. The driver's side one, I'll show you here in a little bit, it was completely shot. It didn't even actually come out. The part of the floorboard itself just failed and it separated all on its own. Headliner removal. This thing is glued around all the edges, front windshield, back windshield, and side doors. When the trim is removed, you can peel that off. And then there are 3 little bow type strips, and that's just a 180 turn, and then you pull it out, and in this one there was a mouse house. Lucky me. The last clip is held in by a little metal seat, and that kind of stumped me for a minute, but I just ended up getting some pliers and bending it down enough to release the bow strip so that I could turn it and pop it right out. Easy day. Now, I separated all of the bed bolts while you weren't looking. These things gave up a hell of a fight. They kept spinning inside their little captive squares, so it took a lot of ingenuity to get them out. I broke a bunch of Dremel bits, and I was never so happy to have 2 of these bolts just break. It was awesome. Now the fun part, removing the bed and the cab. I made some little wooden stands. They ended up being too tall for the jack and the stuff that I had to put them where I wanted, so I improvised. All I did here was lift the truck up, put something under the bed to hold it in place, and then drop the frame out from underneath it. Simple enough, right? Now I needed to remove the gas tank. This is a bed-mounted gas tank, so it had to come out in order to get past the frame. It was like 8 bolts, not a big deal. Pulling the wheels off to make a little bit of space to get this thing lower and so it can squeeze out. Put it on a couple of rolling dollies, and then I just gotta kind of shimmy it between the jack stands in the front, and it came out without too much drama. This has a plastic bed liner in it, which is always pretty much a precursor to say that the bed floor is completely rotted to shit, and this was no exception. So get this thing popped out, take a tour of the bed floor itself, and you'll see that it was in awful shape. Mice were living in here. They literally had just slathered Bondo on top of all of the rust spots. When I get to the bed rebuild, I'll show all of that. It's in such sorry shape that kind of wish I could just get a new bed. I'll stand this thing on end and push it out of the way so that we can get to working on the rest of the truck. So the fuel reserve tank has a hole right through the bottom of it, so that's no good. And you can just see some crusty stuff. Here's just Bondo squeezed through the sides of the bed, through the floor of the bed, just all over the place. It's in pretty bad shape, but it is savable. Now the super fun part, getting the cab off of the frame. Once again, lift everything up, find a way to block it so that it kind of stays. As you can see, I'm picking this thing up half of it at a time, easily enough. This cab with the doors and glass out, very light. Best way to do this really would just be 2 average sized dudes. Honestly, just grab each side of it, pick it up, and then move it off of the frame. I didn't have another average sized dude around, so I had to do it this way. It gave me a lot of fits just trying to squeeze it between these stands. I had to keep moving one stand out of the way, moving it past that one, and then rearranging the stands. And at one point or another, all 4 of those came off one at a time in order for me to get this thing out of there. But I got it out, and now the truck's in, 5, 6, 7 major pieces, and I'm happy about that. There we go. Something was cut out and welded. You can see there's my rear cab mount, front cab mount, and the sections of the rocker and floor pan very rotted. Got a hole in the drive shaft tunnel. And let's go to the other side. Rocker is pretty well shot. And oh crap. Oh, another cab mount. Completely toast. Somebody had welded in some not super great little plates just so they could at least put a bolt in there. So I have to undo all of that. Rocker, let's see, this appears to be underneath the seat brace, cross brace. That's going to be a fun one to fix. A lot more rocker rust. And overall, this whole thing basically just going to get cut out and remade because that metal's super thin. Hey, at least I have one cab mount sort of almost intact. 2/3 of it is. Hoo-yah. So that was a pretty big job to do in only about 2 days by myself. As you can see, this cab is just, it's not in good enough shape that I wanted to continue with anything else, because then I would have had to tear out everything else to do this down the road. I'm not big into doing stuff twice. So I think it's worth a thumbs up and a comment if you think I'm a crazy bastard who took this thing apart all by himself with not much more than a jack stand and some 4x4s. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when a new video drops, and that's it for today. Thanks everybody.